I'm going to come off as a bit of a poser, I will admit. But I have just, for the first time, played Papers, Please. Papers, Please, the 2013, I want to say, indie game by Lucas Pope, which I feel like it's one of those things I don't really have to talk about. And I'm so late to the party, I feel as if I have nothing yet to add to the conversation. I think everything that you could probably say about Papers, Please has already been said. But I can at least kind of talk about my own just experience with the game, and if you haven't played it, to recommend it. Because yes, it is great. I really enjoy it. It's really cool and unique, and it totally hits what it's trying to do. For anyone who isn't aware, Papers, Please is an indie game from 2013 that puts you in the role of an immigration inspector on the border of a fictional, let's say southeastern European country. Takes place in the 80s in what is pretty clearly a sort of a fictionalized version of the either the USSR, or really, to me, it's more like all the satellite states that were just like the Yugoslavia, all those countries that don't exist anymore when they were in these periods of great flux. It feels like you are experiencing the death throes of a regime, and all of these countries that are creating and forming seemingly by the day. Great times of great political unrest and instability. And naturally, what that creates is a lot of immigration. So people are trying to go to the fictional country of Arstotzka, which you are a member of. And the game is you sit in your little booth, and then you call people in from the outside. They present their papers to you. Yes, papers, please. And then they all drop them down on your desk. And then it is up to you to determine whether or not they are cleared for entry into the country. You stamp them with an approve or deny, and then send them off. So initially, I think one of the things that people like to talk about is it's a game that adds an incredible amount of intrigue to a desk job, which is true. I think most people would not consider the idea of just sitting and looking at someone's passport and immigration documents very interesting, and just trying to match them to records and make sure that they're not expired and all that. But man, what you're really playing is a test of your ability to pay attention. The core skill that's being tested is how many rules can you keep track of? There is a time limit. You can only get so many people. You can only get so many people in throughout the day, and you will get a bonus based off of how many people you manage to get through in the line. I don't know if approvals or denials are. I don't know if it's just for approvals, but based on how many people you get, you will get more money, which is important because at the end of the day, you go home and you have to face the fact of paying your bills. So you've got you've got a family to take care of. You've got like a wife, son, a mother-in-law, and an uncle, I believe. And you have to pay for rent, food, heating. If they get sick, you have to pay for medicine. And these costs can add up, and naturally there is sort of a negative downward spiral in the form of, well, if you can't pay for heat, they're going to get cold. And if they get cold, they're going to get sick. And now they need medicine, and now they're hungry, and stuff starts compounding on itself day after day. So that's when so the immediate like pressure on you is, can you get through as many people as possible as efficiently as possible? And that means having to manually check a lot of stuff. Getting better at the game is very rewarding because eventually you just learn. So one thing that just kept tripping me up is passports with invalid issuing cities. There is a list of cities. So you have in your rule book that you can consult at any time. They go through each country and which cities from that country are able to issue passports. And one thing that kept tripping me up was it's the wrong city. Eventually, as you go on, you just get familiar with the names of all of these places to the point where the only time you have to check is if a name really sticks out to you or it's one you haven't seen in a while. There's it's kind of puzzle like. I don't know. I think a lot of just interesting challenges in video games kind of stoke the same fires in the brain that puzzles do. They just do them at different speeds. So there's something in your brain that I think it starts activating when you play Papers, Please. And suddenly, because obviously they start stacking and stacking and stacking all these different documents you now have to check because of events that are going on. It's not just a passport. Now they need a clearance paper. Now they need there's a polio outbreak, so they need a vaccination record. There's all this stuff that keeps getting added on. And getting 4 or 5 different papers thrown at you with all of this information that you have to double check behind the little interview that you give them, and then having to figure out a way to intake all this information, double check it, and get through it as quickly as possible with the proper approval or denial. Because if you get it wrong, you will get a warning, and after like 3 warnings, 2 or 3 warnings, you start getting deducted from your pay. The part of the brain that has to start activating when you're doing that, I feel like it's the same part that has to work overtime when you're in a really complex fight in like Doom Eternal or something, where there's a sense of urgency and you have to put a lot of stuff together and you have to process a lot of information very quickly and make decisions based on it. And certain stuff you can brush off, certain stuff you can ignore, but you're always making a risk. You're always taking a risk by not double checking. You're always taking a risk by not making completely sure that is the right issuing city, or I missed it was past the expiry date, or the one that kept fucking me up was the height. Eventually they start factoring in height, and you have to start referencing how tall the person is based off of the wall in the background. And sometimes it's not easy to tell. Sometimes there's a discrepancy that you can point out. There's an inspection mode, and you point out, you basically click on a part of you click on 2 items, something on one of their documents, maybe, and then, something else in your rule book, and it'll connect them and say discrepancy detected between these 2 things, or between a date and the clock that you've got, or their picture, and then you click on the actual person standing in front of you, and then you can interview them. And sometimes it's not anything suspicious. They're just like, oh, sorry, here's my passport, or here's this document, I forgot about that. And everything checks out, but you have to check. You have to be very rigorous. And that's before, this is like all on a very mechanical level. That's before you even get to the plot or the themes. Naturally, you are living in an authoritarian regime that is in a kind of state of decay. It's in a state of trying to hold on to its power. And you, as a government official, it's a very interesting position to be put in. Oftentimes, you are the main characters in stories like these are lower class, they're in the scum of society, or they're kind of like heroic rebels of some sort. You're a government worker, and the pressure is put on you to enforce the government laws. And that creates natural ethical dilemmas. So very quickly, the game introduces to you an ethical dilemma. A woman comes up to you, and she says, she has all the correct paperwork, but she says, I'm being trafficked into the country as a prostitute. There's a man coming up who, this is his name in his description. I need you to deny him entry. And you're like, oh, okay. So you let her through. And then a couple people later, that guy comes up. And it's him. And he's got all the proper paperwork. And so now you have to decide. And this is very early in the game when your funds are tight. You don't have opportunities that you'll get later to make a little bit of cash on the side. Money's very tight. And you've only got so many citations that you can get before, it starts getting tighter. And again, especially if this is your first time playing, you've probably fucked up a couple times. It just happens. And it's the guy. And you have to decide, how risky do I want to play it? Is it worth potentially getting written up? I don't know what the consequences are going to be. And you can deny him entry into the country. Here's another one. You get a newspaper at the start of the day, and it will fairly often affect the news of the day. Will have something to do with a new mechanic or something that's going to happen that you're going to run into. There is a child murderer who is fleeing back to Arstotzka, and a guy comes up to you in the line, and he says, hey, this guy is coming up. I think he's in line. I need you to let him through because he killed my daughter, and I'm going to get revenge. I'm going to kill him myself. Now, at this point in the game, they've introduced to you that it's up to you. It's your responsibility to identify wanted criminals, and you have to keep the newspaper on your desk to reference everyone who comes up in case they might be a criminal. Some days there's no criminals. But you do have to keep it on your desk. So the guy comes up, and if you don't recognize him, point at the discrepancy with your inspect mode, and then detain him, you will get docked. You will get a citation for it. And it's another thing that's like, are you going to make that decision or are you not? There's like a secretive counter-government group that starts communicating with you that has the potential to get you in some hot water. That means dead with your government. It's what's interesting about Papers, Please is that it is a very disempowering game. You really feel like you're a cog in the machine, and the little ways in which you are able to take some control back ultimately don't mean that much. Like, it's well, sometimes they do, but it's always on a personal level. There is oftentimes no mechanical incentive, and actually mechanical disincentives, for you to quote unquote do the right thing, or for you to make certain decisions that you might see as more ethical. Like, people will say, so okay, there's a guard who works at the security stop, and he says his girlfriend, who he met in the war, is immigrating, so they're immigrating to Arstotzka, so they're going to be together forever, and he needs you to let her through. So she comes through. She does not have the right paperwork. You should, by the rules, deny her. But maybe you let her through. And she says, I'll never forget this. Thank you so much. Actually, wait, hang on. You do get some money from that. You do get a reward for that. You do get a reward for that. But there are other instances where someone gets let in, you bend the rules for someone, and like nothing mechanically comes of it. You don't get a tip, you don't get any bonuses. They just thank you. And you just have to feel like you did something good. It's kind of morally, ethically, it's interesting to put someone in these situations because mechanically, for the most part, the game really like pushes you. Like the structures of the game push you into being a cog in the machine. Towards always playing by the rules, always denying and approving the right people who just all based on their paperwork. Occasionally, you will get pressure from like a kind of corrupt higher up who will be like, let this person in or else. You're like, okay, I guess I got to do that. But for the most part, it's kind of just how it's a very social game in the positions that it puts you into. And how it feels really good to be doing government paperwork and immigration stuff. And when you deny someone entry to a country they're trying to immigrate into, you're like, yeah, I totally got that one. That didn't get by me at all. And I don't know. It some people described it as an empathy game. I hate that term. I hate that phrase. That feels like an admission that video games are not a real legitimate art form. That you have to use the phrase empathy game. I believe Lucas Pope himself described it as an other people simulator. And I think that's very accurate. I think that's more accurate. Because Papers, Please puts you into a position that no one ever really imagines themselves in. You aren't like you aren't even doing exciting government work. You aren't like a secret agent or something like that. You're not a leader of any kind. You are just like a bog standard immigration inspector. You're the biggest thing you do, the most pivotal thing you do is you stamp a passport. And it's a position that no one ever really thinks about being in, or maybe even the ones that they've interacted with. Especially not in the context of having like an oppressive government like Arstotzka is pretty clearly meant to be. There's something like 20 endings in the game. I've gotten like 4 of them so far. And man, it is a very engrossing game, but I cannot play it when I'm kind of tired because you need to be awake and alert to play this game. I was playing it last night when I was a little groggy, and I was just getting excited over and over again. I was getting messed up. Yeah. So if you have not played Papers, Please, I would highly recommend it. Maybe you won't enjoy it. Maybe you'll find it a little monotonous and boring, but it's a really special experience. Makes me want to go play the guy's other stuff. He put out Obra Dinn, The Return of the Obra Dinn, as well as... Actually, he put out a game like a year before Papers, Please that was set in the same sort of little mini fictionalized Soviet region. But you were running the newspaper for a different country called Kolechia. That one seems pretty interesting. Apparently it was made for a game jam. So I think it was called like the Kolechia Tribune or something. Kolechia Daily News, something like that. Similar kind of like ethical balancing act of running news stories versus propagandizing for the government. Yeah, Papers, Please. Check it out.